we have a what happened. And I figured we'd start with Anthem, because that's kind of like the last thing, the closest thing we can remember. I think this would be an interesting like thing to check out first, and then we go into the video next that's like the deep dive on. Hopefully it's a deep dive. I haven't seen it, so we may have to find another one, but we're gonna hunt for the history of what happened. And maybe we may have to do our own research, but maybe we can go to Wikipedia, go that route and find writers and directors and stuff and developers specifically and see where they went. So we may have to do some some of our own research too, which is fine by me. I think this would make a really cool idea to do for like some streams with like a specific company. But yeah, what happened is my fucking guy. I know, right? I know you, dude. You're the one that got me into him. I'm pretty sure. Like I think I had heard of him, but like I didn't actually start watching his stuff till you started sending me stuff. But I figured, hey, we start here. We start with Anthem. We'll pause the Ridge Racer 4 soundtrack. If you guys need DMCA free, cool background music, I suggest this whole OST. I love it. It's good for the background. Anyway.
Also,
yeah,
the latest in the string.
Let's run it back. So this stuff is fantastic for real, right?
Welcome back to another depressing episode of What Happened, the show where we dissect and discuss things
too
like
loud? Too low?
Anthem. Yes, it should come as no surprise, but EA and Bioware's latest title is also the latest in a string of big-budget AAA games that have had rocky development cycles, rockier launches, and the rockiest of post-launches.
Yo,
However,
don't even get me started on that one.
Bioware and Electronic Arts didn't just start and end with Anthem. No, that was a storm front that rolled in pretty much precisely when both entities first met. To tell the story of Anthem, you have to start where all the trouble began, and that's the moment Bioware signed on the dotted line and became part of the EA family. But wait, you're owned by one of the biggest, most profitable video game publishers in the world. A job security, tons of money and resources. There's no downside here. Just ask this programmer. He'll tell you that being part of the EA family is great. Still don't believe me? Well, let's ask these other plucky and thriving developers.
Bullfrog!
Jokes aside, the number
I
of studios
totally forgot
that have
about
been purchased
Bullfrog.
and then shut down by the publishing titan is indeed long and illustrious. And unless things change really soon, Bioware as a whole might be next on the list. But how is this possible, though? How could the minds behind Baldur's Gate, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and Knights of the Old Republic be at risk? Well, when you have a project that's been in development for the better part of a decade, was intended to have a persistent online life of 10 years, and coupled with some murky sales numbers, well, things start to get very what happened-y. So let's all hop into our Time Cop cars and try to see how we got
Time Cop!
In the year of our Lord, 1995, which gave us such milestone events as Pierce Brosnan's turn as 007, Diddy's Conquest monkeying about on the SNES, and the release of the greatest video guide of all time, Bioware was founded in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada by like 10 or 12 doctors who quickly made a name for themselves with 2 releases on the PC. The mech sim Shattered Steel, and the incredibly influential RPG
Baldur's Gate, let's go, that's my shit.
Followed was a string of even
I was
more
a big
hits,
fucking nerd.
which Bioware produced under different publishing partners, and
good.
included such standouts as MDK2, Neverwinter Nights, Star Wars KOTOR, and Jade Empire.
Jade Empire was so good too.
That the bells of looming fate began ringing, and Electronic Arts came calling, since they seemed to have a bit of a fetish for buying top pedigree developers that cut their teeth on the PC market. Bioware fans, of course, were overjoyed. Oh no. Very quickly, things started to happen a little too quickly. The purchase of Bioware was made public in 2007, and over the subsequent 2 years, a lot of key staff just quit the company. Trent Oster, one of the 6 original founders, formed Beamdog.
Okay, so alright, I'm glad we watched this one first, because he's actually going to tell us where some of these devs went to. We're about to totally write this shit down. Straight up. Notepad. Trent Oster. Bet.
One of the 6 original founders, formed Beamdog in 2009 and was joined by Brent Knowles, one of the senior designers on several of their older RPGs. These 2 big departures happened during the time of Mass Effect 2, and that was a series which of course was a commercial and
Mass Effect 2 is when they left.
It didn't go unnoticed by fans.
I remember when J.D. Parker came out, my friend bought it.
Was still
Best Buy,
a bit
he liked it. It was fun,
dude. High fantasy the company was known for, especially when it came to the moment-to-moment
martial
gameplay.
Arts, like
regardless,
Asian
the idea
mythology,
of an entire trilogy that would take into account players' choices
RPG.
was awfully ambitious and exciting. Speaking of which, it was also around this time that perhaps the ambition and corporate structure of EA started rubbing off on the Canadian developer a bit too much. The company started multiplying seemingly overnight. Bioware Montreal, Bioware Austin, Bioware San Francisco, Bioware Sacramento, Bioware Mythic, and Bioware Victory were all either built from the ground up or companies
featuring Dungeon for Devil May Cry.
Bioware Mania. All of these subsidiaries were formed.
I didn't even know they had that many extra
years. Right now,
studios.
though, let's fast forward to the release of Mass Effect.
I'm sure one day I would.
2012, a beloved
you know I like my
sequel
Mass
that capped
Effect.
off
I'll
the
get the
epic
hankering to play it again
and
at some point.
absolutely no controversy whatsoever. Featuring things RPG fans love, dumbed-down dialogue trees, and narrative choices that change the colors.
I'm not 5 shapes and colors, the likes of which I've never seen.
This was not exactly the conclusion fans had waited for, and it was ill-timed because Dragon Age 2, released a year earlier, had already experienced similar fan backlash. This 1-2 punch of disappointing sequels was the first sign that BioWare was maybe
they were like, oh no, it's getting very EA.
Because their stories certainly were. Behind the scenes, however, things were just as tumultuous within the company itself. Just a few months after the release of Commander Shepard's glorious send-off, 2 more old guards of the developer, Greg Zeschuk and Ray Musaika, announced they were quitting the studio they had founded. The exponential explosion of growth for BioWare,
2 more
paired
gone.
with both doctors' promotions to vice presidents within EA, might have been maybe too much pressure or not enough creative control in the games they were making. Whatever it was, they both announced their retirements from the game industry in September of 2012. It was also around this time, according to current BioWare producers, that an idea began gestating within the company. An idea they had no clue what to do with for years. Initially, the project was codenamed Dylan because, it'll be the Bob Dylan of video games.
What?
One that would be referenced for years to come.
Hey, no worries,
which is an actual quote from 2014, often attributed to one Casey Hudson, one of the senior writers at BioWare that had penned the Mass Effect trilogy. Casey would then quit the company that same year.
There we go.
Jesus.
Now we got 5.
It's pretty clear by now that BioWare employees weren't enjoying their jobs for various reasons, and the dumbing down of a lot of their games and the style in which they made them was safe to assume pressure from EA or BioWare's new MO, which was to make their games more accessible and mainstream. Stop that. Work continued on Bob Dylan for 3 more years in absolute silence.
So by this point, they've lost 5 good people.
At EA's conference, Anthem was shown to the world. While it was certainly nice to see a brand new IP from the developer, reception was a bit mixed. There were clear similarities anyone could see between another loot-based cooperative shooter, Destiny, which released 2 years prior. Whatever Dylan was originally going to be, it's obvious that more than a fair share of design choices were inspired by Bungie's IP. It's an online-only sci-fi world that had you shooting monsters for loot, and there seemed to be only shreds of an RPG left in the game. BioWare, however, told fans not to worry, but producer Ben Irving worried them further with the following statement. You think back to BioWare's history, it's kind of famous for creating these really immersive worlds and amazing single-player stories, relatable characters, but there was always a sense of wanting to do multiplayer.
No, there was
Even
not.
looking way back at with Neverwinter Nights, that had a multiplayer mode, and the Mass Effect franchise has a multiplayer mode.
Okay,
and
listen. Alright, listen. Alright, okay. Yes, Neverwinter Nights had a multiplayer mode. You know what it was? It allowed you to run dungeons like playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is what the fucking IP is based off of. The multiplayer component was actually more work. Well, you could design your own levels and run a dungeon with your friends. That's cool. That's not an always online looter shooter or like MMO. It's just it's a cool additional multiplayer component, right? Mass Effect, they did that shooter thing, the wave shooter thing for 3. You know what? I let it slide. It was cool. It was fun. I did enjoy it. But once again, that's an add-on. That's not what the whole game is based on. You know? I don't mind co-op for me. If P2 just play like a party member, I mean, for the narrative thing, I mean, I can understand that. For me, it's not that big of a deal. Like for me, I like it as an add-on, right? As an addition. Like what this guy at the company is trying to push Anthem like it's a good thing. But everything he's mentioning is just an additional, it's like a neat additional co-op feature. Or a neat additional multiplayer feature, right? Except what he does look like, he does mention Old Republic MMO. So he is going to bring up the MMO, but that is an MMO. That's what it's made for. We were expecting Anthem to be something like a main Bioware game. That was the problem. They should have marketed as, this is straight up a looter shooter. This is what it is. It's a looter shooter. There's gonna be some story, but we're working on Dragon Age 4. So we're gonna make this looter shooter. It's gonna be a multiplayer only game, and it's gonna be this. But we're working on a full single player BioWare style experience for you, which is Dragon Age 4. So it's coming. We're working on it, but we're going to give you this first. I think that would have had way less backlash than trying to promote it as it's still a main Bioware game that, this is going to be your next Mass Effect. This is going to be your next Dragon Age or whatever. It's like, no, dude. Alice making a sports game. It's kind of weird. Right. Yeah, exactly. So,
Old Republic is this huge online world. While story has been important, there was this real desire to create this shared world experience, to have an immersive and amazing story that you could share with your friends. Both the story itself and the experiences
what
that you
story
have
though
out in that world. So
there's no story. Spoiler alert. There's no story in Anthem. There's no story. It doesn't exist.
So that means no more romance options, no dialogue wheels. Anthem was pretty much abandoning anything Bioware had done up to that point. But hey, change can be a good thing. Those javelin designs look cool, and man, the flying's pretty smooth looking. Okay, let's just see how this goes. Bioware bought...
Okay, look. Alright, I was gonna say, yes. I mean, to be fair, when they showed us off the way it looked of how it played, it looked cool. Just like how Andromeda's combat looked cool. I'd love to deep dive Andromeda as well and talk about that. But at the same time, like, I have to admit that the gameplay mechanics of Andromeda are pretty fun. I like it. So when they showed us this, like, I like the look of it, right? But the fact that they gutted the story... Like, I mean, obviously there's a very linear story in it, right? There's obviously a semi-plot in it, right? And all the side missions are fucking like just fetch quests. Go kill as many enemies. You get experience points, whatever. Downgrade, thank you for the host. I appreciate you. Thank you. My host alerts are broken. I'm sorry. But thank you for that host. I hope you're having a good night. Welcome in. You know what? We may pull that up too. I think we may pull up the Andromeda one too. I want to see what he covered on it because I do have a documentary that breaks down the big points. I know more about I know more about Andromeda's development than I know about the actual game. Because I didn't finish Andromeda. I played enough of it to get bored of it and not play it. That was me though. But I would love to see what happened on Andromeda. That would be very interesting. We may watch that one next before we go into the big Bioware deep dive. But yo, Downgrade, thank you for that host, man. I hope your night's going good, man.
Abandoning anything Bioware had done up to that point. But hey, change can be a good thing. Those javelin designs look cool, and man, the flying's pretty smooth looking. Okay, let's just see how this goes. Bioware boss Aaron Flynn quits the company shortly after Anthem's debut.
Unbelievable.
You're right.
So, yeah, following the E3 reveal, and don't forget the disastrous launch of Mass Effect Andromeda, the general manager of BioWare,
get to you, man. I'm sorry you're having to go through that, dude. Happy early birthday, though, bro.
Hudson again.
Hope you have a good day tomorrow, too, man.
So, apparently, Aaron wanted
welcome in. We're having a chill stream.
Back in, so the time...
We're having a little chill stream here. We're going over, like, BioWare history and figuring out where the good devs went. And getting like a little breakdown of BioWare, because it's one of my I loved a lot of BioWare games, so I'm kind of like I want to research and see like what happened to his devs, where they went.
Placed by Casey Hudson again. What is going on?
Oh, that's right. He does come back, doesn't he?
Apparently, Aaron wanted out, and Casey wanted back in, so the timing worked to their advantage, I guess? Casey had spent the better part of 3 years at Microsoft farting around with holograms and decided he wanted to finish up Anthem in the end, the game he had abandoned. Now, this is not our first rodeo here at What Happened. You guys have seen enough to know that hirings and firings like this...
And they spell disaster for you
sacrifice!
Regardless, with the newly
BioWare's the ones that did
Hudson,
like...
they announced that Anthem would see release in 2018.
Mass
and
Effect,
they maintained they would support
Age,
the game with various events and DLC
the
for
old
a
Dungeons
good
and
long
Dragons
while.
and
We're
KOTOR, they did
confident
next to
enjoy a
Old Republic.
10-year life. No, it won't. You know what game also enjoyed a 10-year life? Not Destiny. It seems that the announced sequels to your games that aren't even out yet strategy from a generation ago fully morphed into the announced...
They boasted that it was going to be a 10-year-long project, which back in the day we didn't understand that was code for games as a live service that we now so unfortunately know today. Back then, it's like we hear that and we go, oh shit, they're going to give us 10 years worth of fucking expansions and shit? Make it one giant-ass game? That's kind of cool. This was before... I would say this is around the time people started to get upset that it's like, no, we don't want a 10% of a game at launch. And then you're going to give us the whole game over the course of, or at least enough of expansions to make a whole game over the course of like 4 years. Fuck you. Fuck you. Everyone to try to emulate Final 14's success. No, but see, it's not even that, because that's a whole different market. That's an MMO. That's an MMO. That's totally like I understand what you're saying though. They wanted to emulate a subscription service, and I'll tell you what it's more akin to. It's more akin to battle passes. It's more akin to battle royale, really, and like loot boxes, because what's in Anthem? You can buy the javelin suits, you can buy loot boxes in it. I'm pretty sure there's loot boxes in it, and then but trying to promise you story at a later date. And then here's what ends up happening. You put out a boring first product. Here's the problem with all these games and why they fail. Same thing with like the Avengers game. I didn't care about the way they looked. I know some people like bitched about the way the Avengers looked. I don't give a fuck. It's whatever. If they had put out a fun first game, if Anthem as well had been a fun first game that had a storyline in it, it felt like a BioWare game, but it was also online. You could play with your friends. That could carry a good narrative. You have to make the first one good and cliffhang it so we want to go get the next expansion and the next expansion and the next expansion. You got to give us something. The problem with these games is when they come out, they give you 10% of the game. They give you 10% of the game and then nothing else. And what happens? People burn through that 10% of the game like that. It's over and done with in like a month or two. People don't talk about it anymore. People aren't playing it online with each other anymore because they've ran through it a million times. That's what happened with Anthem. Everyone had Anthem beat in like 2 months. And then they kept delaying all the fucking updates that they would fix the game and put story in and do DLCs eventually. They never got to them. They literally just stopped making the game. you know, that's the curse. Avengers crashed my PC so many times. Really? Ugh. Don't worry, you're not missing much.
Your games will have a 10-year lifelong strategy, with both of them being really stupid.
I know. Should make this a challenge, huh?
Now it's time for a new segment, What's Left Bioware. Well, July 2017 saw Mike Laidlaw, creative director for all 3 Dragon Ages, saying adios, followed by one Drew Karpashai, the lead writer on KOTOR, Jade Empire, and Mass Effect 1 and 2 in March of 2018. Now, speaking of 2018, EA announced that Anthem would not make a 2018 date.
That makes fucking what?
The year after. Well, this seems really not very good at all. EA Damage Control was,
8 good devs gone. Hey, welcome back, Dan.
Regardless of how it's being portrayed, we're not looking at this as a delay. We've chosen not to launch Anthem in the 4th quarter. This date is chosen by portfolio balance,
that's right. They did
not
delay
product readiness. And we're really excited by the way the new Battlefield is shaping up. So it probably doesn't make too much sense to launch Anthem right by it. As a new IP, we should give Anthem its own launch window. And you know what, gross EA man, that does make sense. And
bro, they actually delayed it so it wouldn't compete with one of their other big releases. That means at some point EA actually they thought this was gonna be big. And they didn't want them to be competing against one another. Wow, bro. I wonder if they get into how much it actually sold, because I feel like it did actually sell. Like, people actually bought the game because we thought it was going to be way better than it turned out to be. Iwata and Reggie leaving the middle of their respective runs. Yeah, he does not give. Oh, okay. Oh, he does give some figures. Okay, I bet. But yeah, that's why. Like, see, for me, I've just been lazy about getting some new games. So, like, with Anthem, I just decided to wait because I was like, well, it is looking more to be like just a shooter, and I don't really know if I'm digging the style yet. And they didn't say nothing about the story, so I was like, I'll wait on it and get it later on. And good thing I did, because from waiting on it, I got to see the shit show unfold.
Hell, such a delay, plus the 5 years the game has already spent in development, will make for an easy, issue-free launch, I'm sure. So, let's sum up. Casey Hudson is now leading the fractured development of a game he hadn't seen for 3 years. It needs to be always online, have seamless co-op, tons of weapon and loot balancing, and needed a public demo, a VIP demo, ready for early 2019 to boot. Just like another big-budget AAA release, this demo also had no shortage of the troubles. If you pre-ordered Anthem, you would get access to this VIP demo, which would run for 3 days. Well, I mean, some people got access to it, while others didn't. There were 3 main problems with this thing. The sheer amount of players trying to access it caused issues that Bioware head of live services, Chad Robertson, assured were not due to underprepared servers, but couldn't state what did cause these issues. Okay.
No.
Second, were that some specific accounts were being auto-blocked because of the way the game was flagging things, and then the infinite loading issue. The latter would prove to be the toughest nut to crack, and Bioware admitted there was a chance they wouldn't be able to fix it before the 3-day period was over. Anthem was scheduled to fully launch in less than a month.
Stuck on a loading screen.
And the price was right.
Then there was...
The price is right, motherfucker!
Chart. This baffling graphic detailing when and how people could
oh my
play the
god,
game
I remember
was
this
okayed
too!
by a metric shitload of marketing people, and everyone must have thought it was a good idea. I mean, it's a good move to try and explain things to your audience if shit is getting complicated, but when your release chart looks like a periodic table of the goddamn elements, maybe you kind of overcomplicated things from the start. Finally, there was the game itself. You and a squad of friends chose your class and kill monsters to get loot, and then you use said loot and weapons to kill more monsters for more loot.
That's
and repeat.
That's
While
the
there
game.
certainly is a story in Anthem, it was clear to any longtime fan of the company this was a far cry from the RPGs they were known for. And in fact, this couldn't be any farer cry from it. So enthusiasm wasn't exactly at an all-time high leading into the February 22nd launch of the game, and things didn't get much better post-launch. The PS4 version would crash PS4s, online stability was tenuous tenuous at best, and that infinite loading bug from the demo, well, it was fixed. Just now it was the near infinite loading bug. It's not exactly clear why the game is such a technical mess. Maybe because Bioware bit off way more than they can chew with the game's online structure. Maybe it was the constantly revolving door of game directors, or maybe it was because so many senior designers and programmers kept oozing out of the company's back door, or more likely it was all of those things.
Yeah.
Now, while hindsight is 2020 and you want to sell your game during interviews, let's check back with Chad Robertson once more with a quote shortly before the launch, because, you know, it's hilarious. We always want more time. The beautiful thing with Anthem, though, is the fact that we're a live services game.
And that's why I started calling it a live services
We're
game.
always bringing more content, new missions, new stories into the fold later on. So one of those challenges for us was, how much content do we actually ship on disc at launch? Do we have the time to do all the things that we want to do? Because quality is always king, right? One thing with Anthem is quality over quantity.
So he basically just said, listen, I actually don't know how my wide angle looks because I got the circle thing on. Does it work? Oh, it still works. Hi. He basically just admitted that they gave us shit for the game. But the beautiful thing about it is you're going to get the rest of it in 10 years or throughout 10 years. Haha. Oh, wrong button. Do I have that? Oh, I actually don't have that scene on the scene list. What? There we go.
Absolutely. Do we have enough quantity? We believe so, but the quality is definitely what we shine on. Oh man, that didn't age well. Now, far be it from me to tell a company how to run itself, but if your product is in a state where you have to issue patch after patch to try to salvage the product, now's probably a bad time to target the players of your game for perceived slights. Only 2 weeks into Anthem's launch, and people began reporting their accounts were being banned for simply playing the game as intended. I'm sure most people are aware that the employees that ban players or hacking a game are not exactly the same ones who fix bugs, but it still comes off as very tone deaf and a pretty bad look for their PR department in general, especially when your PR department is probably on fire right now.
Yeah.
Well, the real humans won't burn quite so fast in there.
And at the end of the day, yes, players that use exploits and hacks or are toxic to others should be addressed, but maybe you should tackle that when your game isn't in tatters. Just a thought. Like previously stated, both Bioware and EA are in damage control mode right now. Every other day there is a patch to fix some things, but it winds up just breaking something else entirely. Also, since launch, players loudly complained about the quality and quantity of the drops the game was providing, but this seemingly fell on deaf ears for weeks. Then, on March 15th, Bioware relented and increased the quality and frequency of the loot players were receiving. Now, this is either an actual intended fix or a calculated move to satiate disgruntled players. Worse than that, however, there seems to be an underlying issue that even the chunkiest of patches will never solve, that this is not exactly the game ardent fans of the developer wanted. At its core, it's an online loot-based shooter in a sea of online loot-based shooters, with simple window dressing masquerading as actual characters or a meaningful story. Now, it's admirable to want to make a product outside of your comfort zone, but it's pretty clear that the prolonged, unfocused, and fractured development dotted with a lot of talent leaving throughout the years.
Like those 3D models of like the characters,
an exciting goal
actually
for your game
good looking,
to be referenced for years.
It would have been
to come.
awesome to see what they could have done making an actual game,
positive, more so than
like an actual single player game.
Is a cautionary tale of a company reaching beyond their scope and expanding far, far too quickly. Of the aforementioned Bioware subsidiaries, all but one has been shut down or just renamed, with that being Bioware Austin. Now, while some may say that a developer of their pedigree could never be closed down due to its past successes, the same was said of Pandemic or Visceral and a whole host of others. So with all this, it should not surprise that Anthem is now the lowest rated game Bioware has ever released, narrowly edging out its competitors, Sonic and the Dark Brotherhood. This would also be the time to address the commercial prospects of Anthem, because while exact numbers are not public, it was the #1 selling selling game last month. A month filled with holdovers from January and not much else in the way of competition aside from maybe Metro Exodus or Far Cry New Dawn. EA told investors they expect Anthem to sell 6 million units in 37 days, so it has until the very end of March to achieve this. But right now it's a bit murky if they are on track for such a number, because as of right now, all EA has said is that Anthem is BioWare's second most lucrative launch outside of Mass Effect 3, but again, the units sold both physically and digitally are not yet known. And now that most players have finished the main campaign, the immediate concern is the endgame, as there isn't much reason for people to continue with it, at least when stacked up against similar shooters. Now, in terms of fixing that and the future of the franchise, let's get one final quote from the man himself, Casey Hudson. We were, of course, very disappointed about the launch, as were many of you. I've been in there playing with you since those early days, and it makes me sad to hear about any issues that would hold someone back from fully enjoying the game. I take that very personally, and it's been our top priority to get improvements out to you in the fastest, safest way. The safest? What is he talking about? We continue to listen to your feedback, with more improvements to endgame loot and progression, game flow and stability, and performance coming very soon. So there's a lot of work we intend to do, but we understand there is skepticism out there. No. We hear the criticisms and doubts, but we'll keep going anyway, working hard every day on Anthem, an ever-changing world, constantly improving and growing, and supported well into the future by our team of passionate developers. Godspeed, buddy. Godspeed. So while this tale might not have a definitive end yet, you never know when it might get one. But in the meantime, let me know in the comments if you're aware of any other baffling video game blockbusters that failed to bust any of the blocks.
They just stopped working on the game. I'm almost positive they literally just stopped doing anything to the game. Anthem 2.0 canceled by BioWare. Oh. In short, this means that all of the enhancements and changes the team has talked about in the 2 years since the game's launch will never be implemented. No tweaks to the javelins, no skill tree overhauls, and no artifact system. Though players can continue to access Anthem in its current form for now, that form will remain of unrealized potential. Wow. Wow. Holy fucking shit. That's crazy. Yo, we gotta find his let's see. I'll pull this up in a new tab.
BioWare.
I don't know where this is gonna go, but it says BioWare's in trouble. 150 plus senior devs quit, and the sad truth of Dragon Age 4 Mass Effect 4. I'm so curious as to what this is. So fun, I well, I love it. I'm dying of laughter. Hell yeah, Zari. Hell yeah, dude. There we go. Andromeda.
Hello, Pathfinders. If you're just soaring the galaxy in hopes to discover a new verdant planet that's underpopulated,
oh no, that sucks. Downgrade.
Botched timelines, messy lip sync, wonky animation, and faces that look like this. Well, you found it, because this is Planet What Happened. And we're talking about the game that basically killed the franchise. And not just any old franchise like your Fears, your Golden Axes, or your Mirror's Edges. We're talking about friggin' Mass Effect, which is currently on hold, according to EA. And it was all due to the lofty ambitions and technical shortcomings of the fourth game in the series, Andromeda. Ah, Mass Effect, the trilogy that was perfectly executed, promised everything and delivered even more, and had one of the most satisfying conclusions loved by fans the world over.
I just want to take it and just
Yeah, while Andromeda had a whole host of problems all its own that we're going to certainly dive into, Bioware Edmonton's flagship
the registration
IP
key
wasn't
doesn't work
exactly
anymore.
at an all-time high when they handed the space reins of the franchise to their sister studio in Montreal. You might even say that Bioware dinged the side of their ship into an asteroid and then just gave said ship to their younger sibling as a hand-me-down. The Edmonton studio didn't mind because they had their sights set onto bigger and better things. Well, there's been lots of tales told in the stars about Andromeda already, the most accurate insight.
That's why Anthem was put on such a high pedestal, because we knew that the people making Andromeda was Mass Effect 3's multiplayer team. The people that made the multiplayer for Mass Effect 3, they were tasked with making all of Andromeda. And the main Mass Effect, or the main devs that would be working on Mass Effect, are working on Anthem. So that's why Anthem was held up to such high standards, because of the team that was working on it. There you go.
Into its troubled development cycle comes from Jason Schreier's article on the same subject, which you can find.
Also, Jason Schreier, amazing journalist, game journalist. He does the best investigative journalism work I've ever seen. It's so good.
In the description below if you'd like some additional details. However, this is Planet What Happened you're now standing on, so if you want a more visual tour of how Ryder and their crew of idiots destroyed one of the 7th generation's biggest franchises in one fell swoop, well, strap in, cause there's gonna be some turbulence. To start, let's hop into a wormhole real quick to about 2008. Bioware were quick to make changes to the journey of Commander Shepard whenever people complained loudly enough. If the Mako wasn't fun to drive, they'd cut it in the next game. If the people fun to drive, people complained loudly enough.
The nipples on male Shepard are not higher resolution. What the absolute hell is wrong with you, lazy?
If the Mako wasn't fun to drive, they'd cut it in the next game. If the people complained about the combat in Mass Effect 2, then Bioware would just make it into a shooter. One of those earlier concepts that was attempted, but not really
feel like 2 has the best of both.
Exploring the surface of alien worlds.
I feel like Mass Effect 2 has the best
first
system.
game, but scaled back dramatically, i.e. cut completely in the sequels that followed. Therefore, the entire genesis of Andromeda was to revisit that concept with the new technology and tools afforded to developers. Now, to be fair, this is a pretty damn good angle to take to help justify the existence of this entire project. Andromeda was something outside the gravitational pull of the original trilogy, so no Shepard, no Reapers, no Seth Green, thank God. It would focus, however, on what Mass Effect was all about.
I like Joker!
Having new with weird aliens. So this isn't a terrible start so far. What was terrible though was the very next idea they had immediately after. To properly convey the concept of exploration, they wanted players to be able to explore dozens of worlds, nay hundreds, and that's when the dreaded words, procedural generation, were uttered. Now, in 2013, when Andromeda was in the concepting phase, it was a pretty wild idea to start thinking of procedural generation at that scale. I mean, Hello Games were still making cute little Joe Dangers at this point, so for Bioware Montreal, who had only cut their teeth on Mass Effect 3 DLC, to attempt such a thing is rather commendable. Or maybe not. During this time, they would be led by one Gerard Leonie, a fresh hire from Quebec City where he worked at Activision-owned Beanox. His qualifications? Well, he directed their worst Spider-Man titles, so there's that. Now though, with a massive world to play around in and equally massive budget, he embraced the idea of freedom the player would enjoy, exploring an entire solar system. In Andromeda, you'd be able to travel to any planet in real time via your ship, touch down and start poking and prodding and having sex with whatever. An anonymous developer who worked at Bioware Montreal said everyone was excited by the idea. Imagine No Man's Sky with Bioware graphics and story. It sounded amazing. This idea, however, is what caused the main crack in the hull of the Andromeda ship, which unfortunately then splintered off into dozens of smaller issues. Letting the player discover so many planets was that enticing of a feature that would eat up the majority of the project's 5-year dev cycle, as various technical leads would soon realize the realities of making it work across the scope of a Mass Effect game. There was no way all those environments could have that handcrafted feel that ME fans had become accustomed to, so the studio opted for a bit of software called World Machine, which would build the bulk of the topography. Now, typically, whenever an inexperienced developer starts using new, ambitious technology, that's enough for a What Happened episode right there. But, like the galaxy itself, the potential for even more things to go wrong are simply limitless.
No.
While the idea of so much explorable real estate was BioWare's faux pas, the next one was 100% Electronic Arts' doing. You know they were coming eventually. Around this time, EA would start mandating that all their studios needed to switch to DICE's Frostbite Engine, as it is immensely powerful in doing the things it was designed to do.
This was the stupidest decision they ever made. Bubsy 3D was so great and bad. Oh, was it really? Frostbite Engine was not made for RPGs. They did not make the Frostbite Engine to pair with RPGs. It was made for shooters.
Which was to run first-person shooters and
there we
not
go.
really much else. There were no solutions for things like inventories, party management, and just about everything you'd expect in an action RPG. Why EA thought this was a good idea is, I honestly don't have an answer.
Yeah, all their
When
games have to
everything is
run that
done
engine
in first person, or if you're playing a multiplayer match, you don't really need expressive animations for your main character because you tend to not see them. Bioware Edmonton, however, also had to use Frostbite for Dragon Age Inquisition. While they fortunately did create a lot of the systems they needed for that game, which did help out the Montreal team, there was still even more basic features and functions they had to make.
I was so disappointed with
themselves. This in turn lost them a lot of time in the process, which, in case you guessed it, will be a running theme. This collaborative process between studios was something that BioWare was pushing at the time, as they had their main Edmonton office, Montreal, and then the one in Austin, Texas, with the idea being that all three studios would be able to conference to design and problem solve together. It was called One BioWare, which didn't go smoothly. A level of competitiveness grew between the studios, and even paranoia and distrust would eventually settle in, as Montreal felt Edmonton was trying to take over and even poach some of their talent for their projects, whilst Edmonton felt Montreal was drowning in the design phase, which was something only they could fix. All of this was compounded by the fact that both studios were on opposite ends of Canada, while there were other smaller offices in Russia, China, and India who were all given outsourced work, leading to a logistical nightmare to coordinate all the studios with not enough producers to handle the workload.
Well, shit.
Spoilers, BioWare stopped doing this after Andromeda shipped.
I'm sure.
We're now in 2014 and Montreal was still struggling to design around all that procedural generation, just trying to suss out how quests and NPCs would work. This then, of course, had a ripple effect across all the other aspects of the design. The overarching story, the dialogue, and the animation all took a back seat. The combat and vehicular components of the game, something Frostbite excelled at, were, however, going smoothly. This was also the year where a lot of people just started to leave BioWare. Casey Hudson, who was shepherding the project from Edmonton, left due to issues with good old Bob Dylan.
Yeah, so we started Anthem, which was Project Dylan back then, and
Gerard Leonie also got the fuck out of the Andromeda galaxy with no clear reason as to why, but I assume it's because he saw the writing on the wall.
Good luck with that.
He was leading the story team and was considered the creative head of the project, thus leaving it rudderless until Mac Walters, a writer on the original Mass Effect trilogy, was brought in to steer the ship. This would mark the space where Montreal would really need to start narrowing their focus, because even though the procedural generation and exploration on the planet's surfaces was taking shape, it wasn't very fun.
If it's not fun, why bother?
A former Anani who worked on Andromeda explains, they were creating planets and you could drive around on them and the mechanics of it were there. However, they were never able to do it in a way that felt compelling, where you could imagine doing it 100 or 1,000 more times.
Yeah, because it's procedural.
Now, how could you possibly get to that level of production, building vehicles and planets and aliens that are always moaning for the boning and not realize that it wasn't even fun or interesting? A lot of games in and around that time, and even before that, lived and died by their vertical slice, a small sliver of the game that acted as a proof of concept. Andromeda never got that, as everyone was so taken by the possibilities of an explorable solar system that they just pushed ahead with the design for almost 3 years before they, stopped.
100%.
By the end of 2015, the heads of the project started to realize that trying to brute force the procedural generation as the backbone of the gameplay simply wasn't going to work out. Thus, they thought it best to default to a map-based system similar to past Mass Effects, which should have been decided much earlier on.
We have a plan. Kind of. Pretty solid. Jarl?
The team, however, at least wanted to offer more planets than any other game before it, so they planned for 30 different environments that would be made with a combination of procedural generation and handcrafted elements. This was, of course, the initial plan, because as anyone who played the final game knows, it was quickly reduced to 7, which is actually being really generous, as that's counting the tutorial world that you can't even really revisit, and some of those you can't even explore by foot, Jesus Christ. These huge decisions and cuts only really started to happen a year and a half before Andromeda's early 2018 release date, with people familiar with the development admitting that the game finally started to be a game around this time. It really wasn't until Mac Walters came on board, and that was very much a reaction to the state of the game's critical path, where he finally gave it direction.
Because Mac Walters was an original writer of Mass Effect. So he rushed a story for you fuckers to make it somewhat interesting.
Got it into shape.
Damn.
No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Well, okay, you have a game that was running massively behind schedule, was far too ambitious in its features, and was being published by a huge company that values money and fiscal quarters over everything else. What could possibly save the day, or what tried and true solution can get Andromeda out on time? Does anyone know of any way they could...
Hello there, and welcome to Cap'n Crunch's Crunchling Adventure.
One developer stated that this last year and a half crunching on Andromeda was the worst they'd ever experienced in their career. Working on that game so late was very difficult and harder than it should have been. This crunch was mostly driven due to the fact that when all the game systems finally got implemented, now that they had a cohesive vision, it was much later in the development cycle than normal, so bugs started to crop up at an alarming rate, faster than Bioware Montreal could fix them. What's more is that due to the very jigsaw-like nature of the game, running on a modified Frostbite Engine, some features coded by Bioware Edmonton, some made by scratch from Montreal, procedural generation, a character creator, if something broke in the game, it inevitably broke some other unrelated areas, which would lead to a loss of forward momentum. Programmers had to go back multiple times to fix things they thought had been fixed. Having spent 7 years as a bug tester myself, I'll explain this in slightly more detail. If you are assigned to regressing bugs, you comb through a database of issues that programmers claim are fixed, and you attempt to replicate the problem to make sure. If you can't, well then good, case closed. But if you can, then the programmer has to go back and fix it again. This is literally losing any ground you had previously made, and is a reason why Andromeda was so unpolished on the day of release. One step forward, 3 or 4, 5 steps back. We'll put something together, and it's been bug tested and signed off and approved. We then say, okay, we can now move on from that to the next thing. And while our backs are turned, what we just put together would be falling apart. Previously fixed issues breaking again could be caused by almost anything. Changes to the lighting engine, a core system, anything breaking in a major pipeline would cause issues downstream, and downstream usually meant more supplementary things like graphics, audio, animation, the things that you could easily turn into memes. This then leads us into the animation itself, because it's an especially egregious blemish on the path of the Pathfinder. The animation team within Bioware Montreal were always understaffed, coupled with the fact that Frostbite didn't have its own custom solution for elaborate animations you need for cutscenes, dialogue trees, and the like. While there are lots of wonderful programs specifically designed for facial animation, none of them played especially well with Frostbite. Another big factor is that Autodesk, makers of both 3D Studio Max and Maya, suggested that the studio switch to Maya, despite all their animation work having been done on 3D Studio Max at that point, which both Bioware and EA higher-ups agreed to, resulting in the loss of hundreds of hours of work. The animation team wasn't happy, as such a decision should have been made earlier on in pre-production. Also, due to the numerous delays in realizing the scope, story, and sequences of the game, this cut into the overall time the animation team had to just put everything together. It's sad because animation is one of the things Andromeda got lambasted for the most, especially online by fans, but the team were dealt a bad hand here, and for whatever reason, Bioware Montreal would not hire more people to bolster their ranks, even if one of them decided to resign. Things started to look really shaky in the last few months leading to launch, as the game really didn't seem to be doing anything different than the original trilogy, despite it having an all-new story. Bioware Montreal knew the game was going to be less than warmly received than the previous entries, but were hopeful they could build off what they had learned to craft a massively improved sequel. However, the critical reception and the 5 days of early access players got on Origin sealed the team's hopes. This resulted in forums and social media being flooded with things like this, that, and oh, can't forget that. What's more is that 2017 was a kind of a good year for video games.
Yeah.
Horizon Zero Dawn, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Nier Automata, all well-loved future classics, all released within 3 weeks of Andromeda, which made the first full game by Bioware Montreal look like a joke in comparison. Undaunted, the team were doing their best, trying to put out patches to fix all these issues, but when you're the worst selling game in franchise history, you could feel EA's axe hovering above your head.
It's in the game.
If the game had any DLC content planned for the single-player story, it was canceled. Many employees at Bioware Montreal were relocated to EA Motive before then just merging with the company in August of that same year, effectively shutting down the studio. And EA themselves announced that Mass Effect would be going on hiatus.
All that effort and no credits to show for it. Story of my life.
It's now 2019, and there's still no indication if it will ever return.
Nope.
It's all pretty sad because the core of Andromeda, letting the players spearhead an adventure into an uncharted section of space with hundreds of worlds to visit, has an appeal. The technology
it does have an appeal.
Wasn't there. When you further hamper that with an uncooperative engine and the like, it's a pipe dream that just won't ever work out. And while some feel that No Man's Sky has improved enough to make such an adventure palatable, that's not something EA is willing to invest in the long term. If a project doesn't go exactly as they planned, pretty much immediately, they're fairly quick to stomp out all signs of that failure. The list of their studios is long, but their list of casualties is even longer. Whoa, so if you know of any other galaxy-sized gutters filled with glitchy garbage, let me know in the comments below, or fly your Nomad over to the Flophouse BFA Patreon to officially...
I will say this. Hello Games and what they did to fix No Man's Sky, it was still wrong what they initially did, releasing a game in that kind of state. Okay? I'll admit to that. I will say that they were initially wrong by releasing that game, No Man's Sky, in the way that it was. But when you deep dive what happened to them and what they did and how they bounced back, they actually came through with their promise of, we are going to do better. And they took that and they turned it into creative energy, and they worked on it and they made it better. The problem is that all these other AAA companies see what No Man's Sky did, right? And go, well, fuck, we can just do it like that then. And then crunch their studios, and then make a shitty first impression of every game, and then decide to not do anything with it afterwards. Oh well, it didn't work. It wasn't lucrative. They couldn't make it work. What? I'm really curious about this next one, because this next one here is probably going to go over a little bit what we've already heard, maybe. But the fact that it talks about the later part of the thing says sad truth of Dragon Age 4, Mass Effect 4. I'm curious as to what that information is. I don't know this channel, Legacy Killa HD. I don't know what this channel is. We're gonna hope the video is good. If the video starts to suck, we're gonna change it. Okay.
One of
but I'm hoping that maybe there's some new information in there.
Gaming's most storied developers releasing some of the greatest games ever made. You look to the early 2000s, they were on a roll and their reputation was growing with each hit game. There was an expectation that players would be getting something special, something high quality, when they purchased and experienced a Bioware developed title. In the late 90s, there was Baldur's Gate, a game that is credited for saving the RPG genre at the time. In the mid-2000s, arguably their most underrated game was released, that being Jade Empire. Often, though, when people discuss the legacy of Bioware, it goes back to a few specific games, such as Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, one of the games produced during the golden age of Star Wars and gaming. KOTOR is arguably one of the greatest video games ever made, featuring phenomenal writing and characters. Then we have Mass Effect. Obviously, the sequel receives most of the love as it is a better overall game.
But if it wasn't for Mass Effect 1, though, it's where it started.
World building is remarkable. One of Bioware's.
I will say that I do love the RPG elements in Mass Effect 1. I love them so much because I was coming fresh off of like KOTOR and games like the Baldur's Gate series and shit like that, like those older games for PC. I was coming off of all that, and it took me a while to get into Mass Effect, but finally, after a while, I got into Mass Effect, and I'm so glad that I did, because that first Mass Effect was so good. So good. I think Mass Effect 2 does the best of both with the advanced stuff, but I love Mass Effect 1. I love it.
Greatest strengths at the time. Next, we have Dragon Age.
Dragon Age. I'm gonna be real with you for a second. I haven't played Dragon Age. It's one of the Bioware games I never got into. I never picked up and played. I think I owned a copy of it once, like the original Dragon Age, but I never like really got into it. I'm wondering if maybe that'll be something I play this year at some point. Because I never got to experience the Dragon Age games at all. Oh yeah, it's on PC. I can get it cheap. It's easy to get. And plus, I think if I get it on GOG, you get like, or get it on Steam or something, it comes with like all the expansions. So, because the first Dragon Age had like a shit ton of expansions, which was wild. The second one didn't, and the third one didn't, but the first one actually came with like a shit ton of expansions. It felt more like an older school Bioware game. Anyway, sorry.
Origins, yet another example of Bioware at their best.
Oh shit! It'd help if I changed the screen back.
Game that truly took the RPG genre by storm, being showered in praise for its superb writing, choices, characters, themes, world building, and combat. That was Bioware then, around a decade ago. They were still at the top of their game, but things have changed in present day, and this beloved developer has quickly gone in the wrong direction fast. So much so that many, including myself, are skeptical about the future of this studio. Will it even exist in a few years is largely dependent on the quality of the next Bioware experience, that being Dragon Age 4. The story of Bioware is one of triumph and consistency for nearly 2 decades, but the last number of years has been everything but that. The future of Bioware is certainly not a foregone conclusion, but it definitely appears to be bleak, and things have only continued to worsen with time. Bioware is in trouble, and the easy culprit to blame is publisher Electronic Arts, the big bad of the video game industry. They of course play a significant role in all of this, but the issues just run deeper. It's been well documented over the past few years what's going on inside of Bioware, especially thanks to the behind-the-scenes reporting coming via Jason Schreier. One of the biggest challenges that was introduced in the development of Dragon Age Inquisition was EA's very own Frostbite Engine, made initially for the Battlefield franchise.
Hey, we're gonna give you this engine that makes our top-selling shooter franchise, Battlefield, and you gotta figure out how to make an RPG with it. Has anyone made an RPG with this engine before? No. Is it built with mechanics or built with coding to help us code an RPG? Also no. Yeah, I'd say fuck off.
It wasn't EA's executives that forced the change. BioWare's leadership felt they needed an upgrade. Frostbite was chosen because of its immense...
No! If that's true, bro? Dude, was BioWare the cause of that shit? Was Bioware the one that went, no, we need a bigger engine, so EA said, here's Frostbite? What? I say Blizzard is worse now. Oh, no, 100% Blizzard is worse now. And Activision. Look at how long it took for Japan to start using Unreal, right? Bro, did they really just do this?
Franchise. It wasn't EA's executives that forced the change. BioWare's leadership felt they needed an upgrade. Frostbite was chosen because of its immense graphical capabilities and the countless potential benefits of numerous EA development studios using the same engine and sharing knowledge and tricks with each other. Although Frostbite was made for an FPS franchise, which meant every itty-bitty tool had to be coded for an open-world RPG style of a game. This created many time-consuming challenges. In the end, thanks in large part to a dedicated veteran team and strong leadership from
I heard that this wasn't
Mark
that
Dara,
bad,
and Aaron Flynn, Dragon
like
Age
people were still
Inquisition ended up
disappointed,
being
but
a critical and commercial success. For their next title, Mass
yeah,
Effect
they
Andromeda,
made it
the
work.
follow-up to their beloved and award-winning trilogy, strong leadership was something that they did
If
not.
they had done Mass Effect Andromeda at least to the standard that they did Dragon Age 4 or Dragon Age 3, I mean, sorry, I think that it would have been better received. But we also just saw what happened in that development too, so, you know.
This was the first game coming from Bioware Montreal as lead developers. They too had to deal with Frostbite, a game engine that wasn't originally intended for RPGs. While Edmonton's programmers created many tools for Inquisition that were later used for Andromeda, still many more needed to be created. On top of that, there was friction in the air among the Bioware studios, with Edmonton bashing Montreal's pre-production work and Montreal accusing Edmonton of stealing their talent and ideas. To make matters even worse, in late 2014, this is when the mass exodus began at Bioware. Montreal lost a dozen developers and their animation department was depleted. General manager Casey Hudson and game director Gerard Laney would also depart around this time. Mass Effect Andromeda had huge ambitions. It wanted to be No Man's Sky before No Man's Sky was even announced. Eventually, that lofty goal had to be cut, and the game's scope was changed as the team struggled to make it a reality. That initial vision was time-consuming, and ultimately, that led to all hands on deck at Bioware, with Montreal, Edmonton, and Austin working together to get this game out the door. It's been said that the vast majority of Andromeda was made in just 18 months, and near the end of development, teams were behind schedule and finishing later than they should have.
Listen, I'm not saying that, like, Obsidian got fucking New Vegas out in 14 months. Now, I know that New Vegas was also a buggy mess. But New Vegas was fun. Right? New Vegas had a fun story, good characters. Although the game was buggy as fuck. And Bethesda crunched Obsidian to get that shit out in 14 months. It took them 18 months. And they still released a... it's so weird. It just... I feel like New Vegas was even better than Andromeda.
A time when teams were supposed to
and I know that's two different companies too, so it's Bethesda versus Bioware, but
spending the remaining weeks and months polishing, they were instead trying to keep the game together as things just continued to break. Once Andromeda released, it was ridiculed for its dated facial animations and ultimately was both a critical and commercial flop. So much so that Bioware Montreal was basically shut down, with many developers being moved to EA Motive and others joining in support roles at Bioware Edmonton and Austin. Casey Hudson's baby was Anthem, which was supposed to be called Beyond. This is a project that was first publicly discussed in 2012.
I heard it as Beyond. I didn't even know it was called
production for quite some time.
I guess that was the prototype.
With the collapse of Andromeda, general manager Aaron Flynn was out, and Casey Hudson was back in. He was supposed to steer the ship back in the right direction and firmly stated in his Coming Home blog post that he believed the best was yet to
remember
come.
that.
Anthem, like Andromeda, had massive expectations internally at Bioware, with the game originally codenamed Dylan because they hoped it would be the Bob Dylan of video games, with people remembering it for years to come. And present day, I can say with certainty, mission accomplished, although not in the way that they were expecting. Like Andromeda wanting to be No Man's Sky-ish, Anthem also was originally supposed to be more so about survival, and exploration and less so about looter-shooterness. Anthem was plagued by once again issues with Frostbite, but unlike Inquisition and Andromeda, Anthem was an online action game. What that meant was previous tools that they had created for their open-world RPGs did not work here, and they needed to again craft new technology for this style of a game.
Damn.
Even before Andromeda's release and Hudson's return to Bioware, Anthem was in trouble. On the narrative side, Dragon Age veteran David Gator was moved to Anthem and faced pushback to his version of the story because it was too much like sci-fi Dragon Age, and some developers just hoped for something different.
I would have liked sci-fi Dragon Age.
No writer or developer could define difference. In the end, Gator left Bioware in 2016, the story was rebooted, and ultimately, it was as enjoyable as watching the Ghostbusters 2016 reboot on repeat. Lacking strong leadership, various developers were critical of the senior team in charge of Anthem up until Casey Hudson rejoined. The core issue seemed to be their inability to lead. This team was identified as game director John Warner, design director Preston Wadamanik, art director Derek Watts, animation director Parrish Lay, and a handful of other Mass Effect veterans. One comparison that many made to Anthem was Destiny, a comparison that leadership did not even wish to acknowledge. If they had, maybe they could have learned from some of Bungie's earliest...
I also read in another article that Bioware banned talk of Destiny in the office. Like, you weren't allowed to talk about Destiny or refer to Anthem as Destiny-like or whatever.
Mistakes, but they never did. One of the core mechanics of Anthem, flying like Iron Man, which is largely viewed as one of the
because it was basically BioWare's Destiny. That's what it was.
Few positives to come from the game, was originally scrapped. It was only thanks to EA executive Patrick Soderlund
I remember this.
that it was brought back in, following an impressive E3 20.
The reason why they added the flying was because the EA guy was like, this is boring. The EA dev that come in to see what they had so far was like, this is fucking boring. And so they added the flying mechanic as a thing on his second visit and was like, this is better. You should keep this. This is making exploration better. So imagine all that stuff, this big open world shit that you're flying in between that has so much stuff in between, was walking. Was no flying. That you had to walk it before. And then I don't know if he's going to mention this or not, but shortly after this, when they made the first Anthem trailer that they showed off at the Game Awards, that was like so badass. It was either E3 or Game Awards. It looked so badass with all the flying and shit and how the game was going to look. That's when a lot of devs found out what the game was going to be about. There were still devs that had no idea what the game was about or like what they were making or what they were working on. They were that lost.
2017 demo
Development hell.
that blew players away. Anthem was still in crisis. The demo, like Dragon Age Inquisitions years before, was fake.
Yep.
Bioware developers were just learning what game they were making based on the demo shown to the public.
There
At
it
that
is.
moment in time, the game was still in pre-production and was scheduled to release in just about a year.
Imagine being at the Game Awards. Imagine you're a dev working on Anthem, right? And you don't know what the fuck it's gonna be yet. And then you see the Anthem trailer in the BioWare conference. And you watch Anthem show up on screen and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be making. That's what we're making. Oh, when does it come out? 18 months from now. Oh. Fuck. Holy shit. What's a good response for this? I'll just do this. Oh, it messed up. Hold on. Time to divorce my family and get crunchy.
Cheese.
As Casey Hudson returned to Bioware in July 2017 as GM, changes were made. Later in the year, Dragon Age's Mark Darrah was pulled off development of Dragon Age 4 to help with Anthem. Darrah played such a significant role in getting this game out the door that he was installed over game director John Warner, and that was showcased even in the game's credits.
What?
By early 2018, the game had one single mission finished. That's it. With developers leaving in droves around this time, Bioware was far behind and running out of time. What that meant was design flaws had to remain, grind walls were added to extend the campaign length, issues raised by developers were ignored by leadership to later be raised by players, and veteran staff latched on to stupid quote-unquote Bioware magic, believing they would find a way to pull
I remember
through
that,
because
the
they
Bioware
always
magic.
do. Eventually, Anthem released, and the rest is history. It was a total disaster, and nobody could quite understand how to...
Because they didn't learn from Dragon Age 3. They didn't learn from Dragon Age Inquisition. They were given an engine that was not made to create RPGs with. Right? And then they took that engine, and the reason why they had crunch and the reason why they call it Bioware magic is because at the end of that cycle at Inquisition, they actually kind of pooped out a good game. A decent game. And so because of that one experience, they were like, oh, this is where it all comes together. We're in the end game now. We're good. We finally got concept. They can crank it out in 18 months. They did it with Inquisition. The reason why they did it with Inquisition is because they had an engine that they had to modify from scratch to work with an RPG. And then they had to work as hard as possible to make sure they released a semi-decent product, because yes, it did sell well. People were looking forward to Dragon Age Inquisition, but I remember a lot of people were kind of like, about it too at the time. But they actually got something good out, and then they say, okay, we're gonna do it again with a new IP. We're gonna do something new altogether again. And they assumed that these devs that were... I also think the difference is because it's Dragon Age 3 versus a new IP that's its first game, right? With Dragon Age 3, they knew there was already a fan base that they needed to truly please, right? With Anthem, there was no connection to anything previous, right? There was no one or two other games prior. It's brand new. And now they have to modify the engine again to do all this other shit. Right? And then they're given 18 months to try to come up with a story from scratch for a brand new IP that's supposedly supposed to last for 10 years. Where do you start? Where's the story at? Are you telling me that you know from point A to point Z of 10 years? That you have that built? To come out and say that means you already have a story that will last that long, right? You already have the story concepts, the main big beats, and the end game. You've got that planned out, right? Why the fuck? Why they didn't have it planned out? That's the problem. That's the thing. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm thinking in different terms. No, they never did that. They didn't have a story. They fucking just had to cut a bunch of shit and wing it.
Functional Bioware had become. Jason Schreier's exposés certainly gave an idea and did put an emphasis on the departures, but I think many really don't understand how bad things are and how badly Bioware has been bleeding talent. Of course, there have been a number of headlines dating back to the end of 2015 when concerns started to mount over Mass Effect Andromeda. Roughly, I'd say maybe 15 or so developers' departures have become headlines, but that is just not even close to the actual total. From my own research, since the very end of late 2015, over 150 senior Bioware developers have left the company. The last week or so, I've gone through hundreds upon hundreds of LinkedIn profiles, being startled by just how much veteran talent Bioware has lost. This total...
Hey, Cat! You're grateful. I appreciate that.
Oh my fucking god, 21 months. I love you, Crimmy.
Love you too, Cat. Thank you so much for the 21 heckin' months. I appreciate you. Baby. Well, baby. Look, I got the doubles.
Bring it on, bitch.
I got the double text audio thing turned off. So now it does the one. I figured it out, but I still don't know how to do hosts. My hosts are broken. I don't know what happened to them. My hosts, they died. Those alerts don't work anymore, apparently. But welcome in, Kat. I hope you're having a good night so far. It's good to see you. We are deep diving tonight, Kat. We're going into the troubled history of BioWare and where the good devs went. We watched a couple of videos already, but I wanted to do this thing where every once in a while do a stream where I take a company or a game company like BioWare, one I like, and figure out what happened, like them falling apart in a way, now making games that don't compare to their older games, because a lot of these good devs and writers and stuff left, we just found out that 150, since 2015, 150 senior devs have quit BioWare. That's a lot. That is a fuck ton. Of course, I'm not going to look up all those. I've written down some of the main ones, which is still 10. I've written down 10 of the 150, I guess, that seem to be big, major devs that worked on like Mass Effect, Dragon Age, even the older BioWare stuff like the KOTOR Knights of the Old Republic, the Baldur's Gate, Dungeons and Dragons stuff. Because I'm going to go, after we watch these videos, I'm going to go look them up on Wikipedia and see if they're in other companies. And see if they have carried on and if they're making new games. Because if those good devs that made those good games are off doing other things, I want to know what those other things are. I'm curious. What's got them staying with where they chose to leave and go to? You know, are they succeeding in that? Are they, maybe some of them may not even be doing it anymore. Who knows? Some of them could have just retired from making games. But I know that some of them in that list have started their own independent companies or they've joined independent companies. And I think it'd be really fun to see like where that goes. But yeah, so this one apparently, I'm thinking later in this video, we're going to get into what's happening with Dragon Age 4 and Mass Effect 4 maybe, or this person's research done. But yeah, and we also went through Anthem and how Anthem fell apart too. That was fun. But welcome in, Kat.
Mostly does not reflect.
Oh, also, I'll show you really quick. I'll show you the whatchamacallit, the new scene. Boom. And I decided to go like circle mode with the webcam. So it's new look. Got the new look. And yeah. Thank you.
Who have continued work at EA Motive. The big news headlines you've of course heard over the past few years of Bioware departures include in 2020, 24-year veteran executive producer at Bioware Mark Dara, and 19-year vice president and GM Casey Hudson. In 2019 it was lead producer Ben Irving, who was with the company for 8 years, lead producer Fernando Mello, who was with them for 12 years, and studio director of Bioware Austin, Chad Robertson, who was a 9-year veteran. In 2018 it was creative director James Olin, who was with Bioware for 22 years, and lead writer Drew Karpyshyn, who spent 18 years at the studio. In 2017, 14-year Dragon Age creative director Mike Laidlaw, general manager Aaron Flynn, who spent 17 years with Bioware, and lead animator Stephen Gilmore, who was also with the studio for about 17 years. In 2016, lead writer David Gator of 16 years at Bioware, and longtime editor Cameron Harris. Those are the Bioware departures that we talked about and were concerned about at the time. But as I said before, we really only had a glimpse of how badly Bioware was bleeding. The following list contains names of individuals that are no longer at Bioware. This includes their position at the time of leaving. If you read through the credits of games like Mass Effect, Dragon Age Origins, Mass Effect 2, Dragon Age 2, Star Wars The Old Republic, Mass Effect 3, Dragon Age Inquisition, Mass Effect Andromeda, and Anthem, you will see many of these names there. As I said before, this list includes 150 plus senior Bioware staff along with another 50 or so developers, some of which spent decades working at the Edmonton studio. Just some notable names included are Hal Hood, who's with Bioware Austin for over a decade as a lead writer, best known for his work on Star Wars The Old Republic. He departed in 2018, joining Sucker Punch Productions and assisting in the development of Ghost of Tsushima, along with another former Bioware lead writer.
How about that? That's some good shit. Look, see? You lose good people that go to good fucking games. Look at that.
Bioware Austin for over a decade as a lead writer, best known for his work on Star Wars The Old Republic. He departed in 2018, joining Sucker Punch Productions and assisting in the development of Ghost of Tsushima, along with another former Bioware lead writer Ian Ryan, who left in 2017. Owen Borstad was a programmer for almost 20 years, leaving...
2 of them left and went and worked on Ghost of Tsushima. 2 lead writers from Bioware. What the fuck are you doing, Bioware? Why are you letting people like that leave you? Are you serious? Bro, that spirals back to Bioware main and EA main being shitty. Now, I will admit, okay, it's more than likely the people that made it to the top of Bioware, right? EA directly doesn't really have control over that. I know by a fact, like from hearing other like stuff that other news stuff from the past couple of years, that the people who are technically at the top of BioWare right now is people that shouldn't be at the top. They don't care about the main BioWare. They haven't been through it. They're not senior people there. It's mainly like now people who have moved up that EA thought were good or whatever. It's just bad shit, right? You let lead writers that make really good story and narrative and characters, you let those people go? Really start as a show up for work for other companies look amazing. Exactly. And right there, I don't even have to look those guys up, because I'm pretty sure that if they wrote for Ghost of Tsushima, they work at Sucker Punch now, they're going to be working on Ghost of Tsushima too. I guarantee you, they're going to be staying with Sucker Punch. Why would you not? You helped them make Ghost of Tsushima, which was a game of the year. That was game of the year for me that year, was Ghost of Tsushima. Hands down. And holy shit. Let's go.
BioWare behind in March 2020. Peter Wojciech spent 17 years at BioWare, working his way up to lead graphics programmer. He departed in September of 2017. Corey May was a lead designer and then editor at BioWare for 17 years before moving on in April of 2019. Zosar Shaker was a lead programmer of 13 years before departing in August of 2017. Wow. Corey Kolek, a lead software engineer who joined at the end of 2009, departed at the end of 2017. Noel Lukasiewicz, 13-year veteran and lead environment artist, departed in June of 2018. Paul Masters, who was a lead engineer for nearly 11 years and left in August of 2020. Trevor Gilday, a lead VFX artist of over 14 years, left in October of 2020. Keith Urex, a programmer of 16 years, left in February 2021. Stephen DeLue was a QV information specialist up until January 2021 after spending over 15 years at BioWare. Michael Liu worked his way up to lead creature designer and left in January 2019 after nearly 13 years at BioWare. Ryan Hoyle was a senior software engineer, spending at the time his entire career at BioWare from 1998 to January 2020, around 22 years. John Fedorkov served as infrastructure lead on Anthem and departed in June 2020 after nearly 14 years with the company. Corey Andruko served as franchise development director, having a leadership role on the Mass Effect trilogy. He too departed after 11 years in July 2017. Truthfully, there is no nitpicking of veteran staff here. This is a problem that BioWare has. You can look to promotional material put out by BioWare over the years and see that most of the featured developers are just now gone. Wow. Certainly, between 2017 and 2018, they bled the most talent, but since then, it has continued. BioWare is not the biggest game company in the world. They're no Ubisoft, who employs over 14,000 developers. Based on publicly available data, BioWare Edmonton employs about 320 developers as of late 2019. Montreal, before it was basically shut down, had over 125 developers. Austin, I would assume, has maybe 200, give or take. Regardless, over the past 5 years, my best estimate is around 250 to maybe 300 developers have moved on, with a large portion of that number being experienced veterans.
Yeah,
the current leadership at BioWare had attempted to quell concerns about all of these departures. Once Casey Hudson and Mark Darr's departures were made official, project director of the next Mass Effect and 12-year BioWare veteran Mike Campbell highlighted a few veterans who were still at the studio, including one that had returned. This is not the first time BioWare leadership attempted to mitigate concerns. In late 2018, Mark Darra and 12-year BioWare veteran Matthew Goldman, who is now creative director of Dragon Age, put out a statement claiming that they had put together a strong team of veterans whose experience stretched from Dragon Age to Jade Empire to even Baldur's Gate. This statement came following the first teaser trailer of Dragon Age 4, The Dreadwolf Rises. 2 years later, BioWare would do something similar with Mass Effect, releasing yet another teaser trailer for the 5th Mass Effect game. Like Bethesda Game Studios, who released trailers for both Starfield and The Elder Scrolls 6 years in advance to send a message to longtime fans that a game like Fallout 76 was not their future direction as a developer, BioWare 2 was doing something similar, although in this case, it was to send a message to fans that they were back working on beloved franchises and they wanted to accumulate some hype and anticipation for the future. The problem with that is, what is there to get excited for? 2 trailers which show absolutely nothing. Now, even more leadership have departed, and those blamed for the mismanagement of Andromeda and Anthem are steering the ship. I've talked quite a bit about Bioware's departures in this video, but arguably the biggest departures came nearly a decade ago. The Bioware doctors, the founders who served as the faces of the studio for a long time. Towards the end of 2012, they called it a career. Both had become exhausted by the games industry and wanted to do something different. It is important to remember, as easy as it is to blame all of Bioware's modern-day problems on Electronic Arts, much of this is of their own doing. Bioware was purchased by Electronic Arts in 2007, and you could argue some of their best work happened because of EA's size and enormous amount of resources. Bioware founder Greg Zeschuk claimed that when they were running the show, they retained creative control.
But that's because we know that they do
because
quality
of their
content.
maturity. Of course, this relationship came with challenges, especially considering the time when EA's Ultimate Team franchise wasn't the cash cow like it is today. EA did rely on the success of Bioware's RPGs. Nowadays, not so much. The EA-Bioware relationship is comparable to that of Activision Blizzard's, except in that case, Blizzard's leadership lost complete control and were forced to take their talents elsewhere, as Activision was more concerned with following the money rather than giving Blizzard's development teams the freedom to take their time and innovate. Bioware's leaders just got tired, and I sense that's an issue that has only continued over the years. You see, while many of these Bioware departures have led to many veterans joining the likes of Epic Games, ZeniMax Online Studios, Ubisoft, Crystal Dynamics, and a number of other AAA studios, the majority over the past few years have joined 3 specific game companies: Improbable, Aspire Media, and Archetype Entertainment. Improbable has the most Bioware veterans. From my research, I'd say around 50 or so have joined the game company in the last few years. Once Aaron Flynn departed from Bioware in July 2017, he eventually joined and took a leadership role at Improbable, serving as general manager of their newly formed Edmonton branch. Tons of Bioware veterans would follow. Aspire Media is another developer that has gobbled up a significant chunk of Bioware talent, with multiple veterans joining and taking a leadership role on a mysterious new project. That project has been rumored to be a Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake. Again, best estimates point to a few dozen Bioware developers filling the Aspire Media ranks. In April of 2019, it was announced by Wizards of the Coast that they were forming a new Austin studio called Archetype Entertainment, and it was being led by Bioware 22-year veteran James Olin. Shortly thereafter, longtime Bioware lead writer Drew Karpyshyn would join the studio. Towards the end of 2019, Chad Robertson would depart from Bioware to join Archetype.
So these are all devs that have left Bioware that are now part of these companies. And you notice what they've gone back to? Aspire is the one that's supposed to be handling the KOTOR remake. Aspire, Aspire, whatever. They're supposed to be handling the KOTOR remake, and they've got this many people from Bioware working with them. Absolutely, I would scoop those people up. Are you kidding me? If you got the rights, for real, if you got the rights to KOTOR, to make KOTOR or remake it, would you not want to have Bioware people that like worked on KOTOR to join your ranks to help you make a remake of it? That would be fucking solid.
Estimates point to shortly thereafter, longtime Bioware lead writer Drew Karpyshyn would join the studio. Towards the end of 2019, Chad Robertson would depart from Bioware to join Archetype as vice president and studio general manager. Since then, a dozen or so veterans of Bioware would depart from the studio and join Archetype. As it stands, Bioware is in trouble. Development of the next Dragon Age has been everything but smooth.
That's why I with a grain of salt, I take it when they say, hey, maybe Mass Effect 4 and Dragon Age 4 will be okay. You know, maybe they'll really come through with these games. I already knew some of this, or most of this. I didn't even realize it was that much. I didn't even realize that it was that many devs that were gone. That is shocking. And telling. And makes me have zero hope for Mass Effect 4 and Dragon Age 4. I have zero to little faith because of how many people that made those games good are gone. Downfall of Rare, yeah. No, I know. Yeah, they're a similar one too. That's also very sad. And that's BioWare for me. And dude, it's oh.
After Inquisition, development had begun, with a few dozen developers working on Project Joplin. Leading development was Mike Laidlaw and Mark Dara. The initial goal of Joplin was to be smaller in scope than Inquisition, but much larger in player choice, reactivity, and depth. There was a big emphasis on...
See, this is a cool concept. I remember them talking about this. I like the fact that they thought about going smaller, you know, not big open world pre-rendered not pre-rendered, what's the procedural worlds, you know, open world massive shit with nothing in it. I'm so sick of that. That's the one thing I'm sick of. I am so sick of these RPGs that decide to go open world and has nothing in them. It's like, oh well, look how big we got the map. The map is massive. The map is so big. Don't you like that? And we just put battles everywhere and a bunch of fetch quests. And you know, we have some story in there. We have a story, you'll get there. But also, to make, because we didn't write a long enough story, the story is only about like 30 hours, 40 hours. We're going to put a grind wall before the final act. That takes you forever to get to the final act. So then, well, we can push it to 80, 90, maybe 100 hours. Fuck that method. Fuck games that keep making RPGs like that. I hate that shit. I want to go back to linear. RPGs didn't have to be so open worldy. You know, leave like the let me do whatever the fuck I want to shit like Elder Scrolls. You know, that works for Elder Scrolls. You can go do whatever the fuck you want. It's big open world. It's a sandbox. Whatever. It's a different type of RPG, right? And they know how to make those. People like BioWare don't even be making that shit. Give me the good set pieces, a good story with lots of choices and dialogue. That's what I want in a BioWare title. Yakuza, the offshoot. You make it as dense as fuck. Right. Like Yakuza is you know, two areas usually normally. A contained area. Really well done graphically. Great music, great stories, great side quests. It's perfect. It's a perfect example of doing something that feels open while also being contained. If that makes any sense. You know, it's not a massive map. It's a regular city map. Once you get used to it, you know where everything is at. The side quests are fantastic. The main story is great. And the main story even takes you to other places that are also very small set pieces. And it works. It completely works. And it's good. Sorry, mini rant. My bad.
Replay value. The issue that plagued Joplin was the other BioWare projects at the time were on fire, which forced developers to be moved onto both Andromeda and Anthem to help get the game.
Fuck off. So you're telling me that by the time the Dragon Age 4 dudes got the vision to go, look, we're not going to go that big with it. We're going to go back to kind of roots. We're going to make it small. We're going to make it very dense with, I like the word like you use, dense. We're going to make it very dense with, you know, good story, good character development, good stuff. And then BioWare is like, hey guys, yo, that big multiplayer game we're working on, Anthem, it's a dumpster fire. We need you guys to come over here. And also, by the way, Mass Effect is also on fire, and we kind of need you to go over there too, so you can't just have to stop doing Dragon Age 4 for now. Sorry.
Game shipped. Eventually, in late 2017, most of the staff was moved to Anthem and Joplin was cancelled. Soon after, Dragon Age 4 would be rebooted, with Project Morrison being started with a focus on a live service.
And this is where fans said, fuck off. You are not doing to Dragon Age 4 what you did with Anthem. No. Bad BioWare. Bad. And I'm pretty sure they come back off of this
component. Mike Laidlaw would depart from BioWare shortly thereafter. A few years later, BioWare attempted a No Man's Sky Anthem, spending about a year of development time and a couple dozen developers working on it. In late 2020, following Dara and Hudson's departures, BioWare Austin studio director and lead developer on Anthem 2.0, Christian Daly, was moved to oversee the next Dragon Age game.
See, now that's concerning. The guy that they brought in to to stitch up Anthem and to revive Anthem, abandoned Anthem and just moved on to Dragon Age 4. That's very concerning. Even though I think what they're about to do next is they're going to talk about canceling the games as a service thing and go back to single player. Even with that being said, that's very concerning that they brought in a guy that couldn't even try to save Anthem. Try to do a No Man's Sky. He couldn't even do that. That's worrying. Game of service that works is TF2's hats. That's it. TF2. Team Fortress 2? What's TF2? Is that right? Yeah. I never played TF2. I didn't even know that had a story. Or like things with it.
Months later, EA examined the work on Anthem 2.0 and had the option to cancel it or invest further needed resources. Ooh. They ultimately decided to cancel it, something that they should have done far earlier. Around this time, EA also agreed to drop the live service mandate for Dragon Age 4. This was done because of the failure of Anthem, but also the success of sister studio Respawn Entertainment's single-player.
That's right, because fucking Fallen Order sold so well and did so well, and it was a single-player game.
Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which EA executives were surprised and impressed by. The reality is that Electronic Arts is giving Bioware everything that they need to hopefully turn things around. Edmonton and Austin now have years of experience with Frostbite. They can craft the single-player RPG that they want to make. The unfortunate truth, though, is that the damage has been done. For a number of reasons, much of the talent that brought us the Mass Effect trilogy, Jade Empire, KOTOR, Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, and Dragon Age have moved on. Some of that is just the usual developer turnover that happens with every studio and game, but the last couple of years, based on the insider reporting and sheer amount of consistent high-profile departures, it's clear many are just tired of working at Bioware. That's why I've been saying for quite some time, the Bioware of old is gone. This is the developer that stressed and crunched holding onto the Bioware magic belief with Dragon Age Inquisition. Fortunately, that game was mostly well received and did financially pretty well. The next big RPG, Mass Effect Andromeda, was not. A game that aimed for the moon but landed in the dumpster, especially considering the enormous expectations that were placed on this follow-up game to the Mass Effect trilogy. Plagued by mismanagement and some of the worst crunch developers had ever experienced, Andromeda is a game that everyone hoped to move on from. Anthem, though, was arguably just as disastrous. This time, the main Bioware studio was at fault. Developers were stressed, depressed, having mental breakdowns, and leaving in droves during development. Thanks to mismanagement and lacking direction or a vision, this game was rushed out the door and became Bioware's most poorly received title to date. Now, of course, this developer is not destined for failure. There is still time to turn things around, but they are on their last leg. If they don't deliver on Dragon Age 4, there is a great chance Edmonton and or Austin will be shut down. EA is known as the killer of game studios for a reason, and with the rise of EA Motive and Respawn Entertainment, Bioware may be sitting in a position that Visceral Games found themselves in. EA has grown to the top of this video game industry thanks to their Ultimate Team franchise, which only continues to grow. They don't need or rely on Bioware, which makes them expendable. When Casey Hudson returned to Bioware in mid-2017, he sounded optimistic about the future, highlighting his experience away, which he felt made him a strong leader. In a series of blog posts in his first year back, he laid out his vision and excitement for Bioware. Around 3 years later, he was gone. In his goodbye blog post, Hudson stated he was still optimistic for Bioware, but he himself needed to do something different. Sadly, that's a conclusion that many have come to. Whether Bioware's current leadership can fix its dysfunction and deliver with its upcoming games is a question that will remain for quite some time. But for right now, looking at the chaos of the last decade, I don't see anything to be optimistic about. PR statements and trailers with no substance do nothing for me. Bioware's strengths years ago are now their weaknesses. The upcoming Mass Effect trilogy remaster should be a step in the right direction, something that I personally am looking forward to. Still though, from controversial figures having creative input to questionable narrative descriptions of the next Dragon Age game, there's much to be nervous about. This is a developer running out of chances and playing with EA's patience. The pressure is on, and everyone is watching. Anyway, what are your predictions for Bioware? Do you sense a great rebound, or fall is coming? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below.
I do not think that BioWare is going to have a good comeback. I really don't. I honestly, I feel like after everything we've seen and everything that I've known prior to watching all these videos we just poured into, yeah, no, I'd rather go look to see where these other devs are and see what games they're making. Because I also agree that I don't think that the old original BioWare is there anymore. Maybe they could make a good game. It's, you know, I am of the essence of, you know what, if you make a good game, I'm gonna praise you for it. You know, I'm gonna appreciate that you did put the work into it and you decided to make a good game. But considering the fact that most all of those people that made those games good are gone, and the people that are left are people that were on burning ships, it doesn't leave me with a lot of hope. Doesn't leave me with a lot of hope. They can't have another Andromeda. If they make another Andromeda out of Mass Effect 4, especially since they are returning back to the lore, we saw Liara. We saw her find Shepard's N7 fucking headpiece thing. You know they're bringing it back. They're bringing back that arc. If they Andromedify that, that's it. It's over. It's over.